Hey, Johnny.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know how Gary came up with something every week to ask me when he said, hey, Jason.
I don't know.
He always had something interesting to say, and I don't feel like I can do that. Ooh, I like your screensaver there. We should put that up on the board sometime.
Banana moon pies?
Ooh.
That's something good to say.
Banana moon pies. Gary would not speak favorably about banana moon pies. What are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about a new lesson series.
A new lesson series.
Yes. We determined that at least for the next few weeks, we are going to be looking at a book by Wendell Winkler. I don't know him.
I had heard him speak many times, or several times, through my younger years at Freed Hardeman especially, and then through some other lectureships and workshops we went to. He was a great preacher and was a teacher of preachers for many years at places like Freed Hardeman, and then he was the head of the Bible department at Faulkner University in Alabama for a number of years as well. So,
Never heard of that.
It's small school, yeah.
Probably good then.
Yeah, it was. Back then it was. I don't know much about them now, but I'm sure they're still. I'm sure they still are.
So anyway, we decided we were going to work our way through this little study book, and it's just fortuitous. I like that word. That it just goes along with what we were discussing this last Wednesday. Our first lesson is overcoming unforgiveness. Now, spell check doesn't like it.
Spell check doesn't like unforgiveness, but that's the way he worded it.
That's the way he worded it. So basically, we're going to talk about why we don't forgive people and how we overcome that. This book, I liked it because it talks about a lot of things. The title of it is Heart Diseases and Their Cure. These are a lot of things that just go along with things that we need to make better in our lives.
Right.
Go ahead.
So some of the chapters, excuse me, some of the chapters cover things like overcoming envy, overcoming ingratitude and selfishness, overcoming discontent, overcoming fear, worry, overcoming hatred, and others. I'm skipping around a little bit, but like you said, we won't necessarily try to. We may not cover the entire book, but we'll pick out some that are particularly apropos to our society today, and touch on the biblical response to those things.
And we were discussing it earlier, and there's a lot of people out there that just won't forgive anybody, anything, which is certainly not scriptural. And they don't forgive us because we talk about the scriptures.
Right.
So, okay, so overcoming unforgiveness. First thing we want to know is, first section is what is forgiveness? Well, to kind of learn that, we need to know what is not forgiveness. So, one of the things we tend to do when we're mad at somebody is we ignore them. We figure they sit on that part of the auditorium, and I sit over here, they can come and go, and I don't have to deal with them, I don't talk to them, I just ignore them. That's not forgiveness. And we'd like to say that, you know, we didn't yell back at them when they yelled at us, so that means I'm good. But it doesn't mean you didn't get mad at them because they yelled at you, or they said something you didn't like. And ignoring it, ignoring the fact that they're doing something that's wrong. That's not forgiveness. If you know something, we talked about that Sunday morning. If you know something's wrong, you need to say something. But you need to do it with the right attitude. Okay, so let's look first at Luke 17, verse 3. And that tells us that, take heed to yourselves. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him, and if he repents, forgive him. That's a statement from Jesus that says you're supposed to do it. If you're supposed to do it, you just can't ignore it and think you're right in God's eyes. And then the last one of these is his title was Putting the Offender on Probation. Do we do that? So how do we do that?
Well, you make your forgiveness conditional. I'll extend forgiveness to you until you give me a reason to withdraw that forgiveness. And that's what probation is. We'll let you out of jail until you mess up again, and then once you mess up again, you got to go back and serve the time that we let you out of jail for. So
Exactly.
yeah,
And you put the original one back on
Right.
top of what they just did again.
right.
It's not like you're starting over with them.
Yeah.
You just keep piling it on.
Yeah.
So, how do we know what forgiveness is? Well, we've got lots of examples in the Bible about that. We know what it is by observing what God does. Okay? He forgets and he puts it out of his memory. Hebrews 8:12 says, "For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sin and their lawless deeds I will remember no more." So, can we forget things?
We can try.
We can try.
We can do our best. We talked about that at length this afternoon, and we're not God, and sometimes, God can make the God can choose. He can make the choice of what he remembers and what he doesn't, and sometimes that's harder for us, and so we don't live in the shadow of that sin that's been committed against us. We don't let it fester, and we don't cling to it, and we don't keep it at the forefront of our minds. We let it go. But there may be things that happen that remind us of that, and just because we have that memory pop up or we remember what somebody did to us doesn't mean that we're still holding that against them, or that we're holding that charge against them, even though we might remember the details of what happened. And that might happen. You might actually forget about it for years, and then something happens or somebody says something that reminds you of it, and all of a sudden it's there in your mind again. That doesn't mean you've sinned by remembering something that took place. It's just we're imperfect, and our memories, when we want to remember, sometimes we can't. When we want to forget, sometimes we can't help but remember. So,
And we can put it out of our minds by replacing it with other things.
Right.
And not dwelling on it. But when we dwell on it all the time, then that's when we're not forgetting it. We're not trying to forget it. We're dwelling on it.
yeah,
God treats us just like he did before we sinned, after he has forgiven us. So if someone has done something wrong to us and we say we forgive them, do we treat them the same, or are we still kind of holding back because we haven't truly forgiven them? So in Luke 15, verses 20 through 24, "And he arose and came to his father, but when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servant, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring a fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this is my son, was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to be merry." So did this father hold back his forgiveness and his love for his son when he came back?
Nope.
This teaches us that Jesus and God is going to be the same way.
Yeah.
When we repent, he accepts us back. He treats us just like he did beforehand. But we have a tendency not to do that.
he restores the relationship.
He restores the relationship. That's a good word. Good thought. So examples of always make things easier for me to understand. So let's look at a few examples from the Old Testament about forgiveness. We remember Esau and Jacob. Why was Esau so mad at Jacob?
Jacob cheated him out of his birthright, out of his inheritance, out of his blessing.
Jacob didn't do well by Esau. So Jacob ran, and instead of trying to make peace with his brother, he ran because he thought Esau was going to kill him.
Well, Esau said he was going to kill him.
Esau said he was going to kill him. So there was definitely an offense and a unforgiveness at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But what happened when Jacob returned? In Genesis 34:4, it says, Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him and wept. Would you be weeping on your brother's neck if you haven't forgiven him? I don't think so.
Yep.
So that's an example of forgiveness. And he had a lot to forgive, but he did. And then our next one was Joseph and his brothers. And we all know that story. That the brothers got jealous of him and they sold him off into slavery, and some of them even wanted to kill him, and he went off and did great things because God blessed him. And then the brothers had to come and basically beg food off of him, not knowing who he was. And then when they found out who he was, they were afraid of what was going to happen. And Joseph told them that he forgave them and not to worry about it. And that that God had put him in that position so that he could take care of his family. So Joseph forgave his brothers and took care of them. Now that's not just saying, oh, I forgive you, and then walking off. That's, right. I forgive you, I've accepted you back, and I'm going to take care of you. So then the next one we want to look at is Moses and his brother and his sister. So that story, if we remember, was the fact that for some reason one day Miriam and Aaron woke up and they decided they wanted to be partly in charge too. And they confronted Moses. This is in Numbers, the 12th chapter. They confronted Moses about that, and they brought up something that they didn't like about him. You married this foreign woman, so we're better than you are, so we ought to be able to talk to God and do what you're doing. So Moses let God choose. Moses didn't get mad at him. He stood him before God and let God show what he wanted to do. But in the 13th verse of that chapter, Moses cried out to the Lord to heal her because she had turned leprous.
Right.
And if you were still mad at somebody and unforgiving, you wouldn't want God to heal them.
Right.
So that shows us another example of healing. And then David forgave Saul. Saul went around trying to kill him all the time.
Chucked a spear at him once, sent an army after him a couple of times.
Exactly, and followed him into the hills and chased him into caves. And as he was doing that, David forgave him. He had multiple times he could have killed him, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. He said, I don't understand why you're trying to kill me, but you're the king that God has chosen, and I'm not going to lift my hand to hurt you. And then the story we just read about the prodigal son, as we call it, mm-hmm. who one of them ran off and wasted all of his money and his time and did things that were just horrible in the sight of what a Jew would do, let alone his own father. And yet his father welcomed him back. Those are some prime examples of how we should react when we forgive somebody.
I've heard people say before, we need to rename that parable. Instead of calling it the parable of the prodigal son, we should call it the parable of the forgiving father.
Yes.
Because the father really is the central figure of the story, not the young son. I mean, the young son is important to the story, of course, but it's the father that we really want to pay attention to in that story. And I like that thought.
And we also need to look at the bigger picture of who is our father in that story, and who are we in that story,
Right.
and what we want that forgiveness to be when we come back to the Father, if we've gone off, or if we're the one who stayed there the whole time. Should we be concerned about those that have wandered off and come back, and be jealous of those?
Right.
So what we do is now we get to the part of, how do I know if I've really forgiven someone? Do I feel bad if something bad happens to the other person? Ever do that?
You know, that can be hard not to do when somebody that has been unkind or has been outright mean to you, and then they get what's coming to them, or they get their comeuppance, so to speak. It's hard not to feel good about that. And I think we need to question ourselves in that. Or do we rejoice at somebody else's misfortune? Do we rejoice at bad things happening to somebody else?
We like to say, "Oh, karma got you."
Yeah. We shouldn't say that anyway.
We shouldn't. Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of our philosophy.
Yeah.
They've been doing bad things to me, and all of a sudden something bad happened to them, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
That's not. You haven't forgiven that person if you have that attitude. Do I avoid the person? This one hits home.
Yeah.
Those people that you just don't get along with, you try to avoid them instead of trying to get along with them. So, do I talk to them only when I have to? Do you put on that fake smile and stand there and go, "Yeah, hi, how you doing? Yeah, I'm glad to see you. Can't wait till you walk on so I can talk to somebody else"?
Yeah.
Do I keep having vivid memories of the offense? This is what we talked about a little while ago, forgetting things, getting it out of your memory. Do you keep dwelling on what happened, or do you let it go? If you keep thinking about it, it's hard to be forgiving if you just keep thinking about it. Do I brood over what happened to me? Am I having a pity party?
Yeah. I think those two out of the whole list, those two are probably maybe the hardest maybe I say that because they're the hardest for me. But just not reliving that offense over and over and over again, and thinking about, well, what I could have done to get them back, or what I could have done to one-up them, or, what I should have said in that moment, and all those things, and just keep reliving that. And that's not good for you. It's not healthy.
No, it's not.
It's not forgiving.
I got an example of that happened to me this last week. I drive by this car lot that hasn't had cars in it for a long time, and the guy had stuck a trailer out front. Well, I've been looking for a trailer, so I pulled into it, and his open sign is there, and I go up, and the doors are locked, and there's this note saying, "Call me at this number." And I call his phone, and it's obviously a cell phone, and I wait until it gets through all the stuff, and then it goes beep, but the mailbox is full, so I couldn't even leave a message. So I'm standing there at the office, and I call the office number, and I'm watching the phone ring inside, and I leave a message on that phone. Later that evening, I get a call from the guy when he finally showed up at his business, and he goes, "Oh, well, there was actually a guy waiting here when I got here, and he bought the trailer." every time I drive by that lot, I look over there and go, why didn't he call me? You know, I just can't. I just
Yeah.
need to get it out of there and drive a different way or something, I guess. But
Don't avoid it.
don't avoid it. Don't avoid it.
It's on the list.
Just, exactly. So, I'm brooding over the fact I didn't get a trailer, even though I know I probably didn't need the trailer. But anyway. So, do I gladly pray for them when they need it? We've talked about this. I've mentioned this several times, that it's really hard for me to be unhappy and fighting with my wife if I'm praying for her every day of what a blessing she is to me.
Right.
So if you're praying for someone, and you're not, and we'll talk about this a little later if we get to it, you're not just praying for them to get over it or not do it again, but you're praying for good things to happen for them.
Right.
And the last one, have I tried to help them if they needed it? So if they end up needing help doing something at their house, or somebody to talk to them, do you avoid that, or do you volunteer for it?
I think those last two are key. I mean, the rest of them are things that you're trying not to do, and really involve yourself, thinking about yourself and what's going on with you. The last two are shifting the focus on trying to have the right relationship with the person that is causing the problem. And praying for them is, I think it's really saying to God, help me, have a right relationship with the situation. God, honor that kind of prayer and seeking good for that person. Again, it's stopping, not being self-centered. By going to those last two, your focus is shifting to a positive thing in the other person.
Right. The last two, the focus shifts off of you to them, and in a good way, not a bad way.
Right.
So the importance and necessity of forgiving one another. Do we have to forgive people?
Yes, we have to.
Why?
Well, because first of all, we're commanded to.
We're commanded to. That's right. Mark 11:25 says, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against one another, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. So we're told we have to forgive people. Okay? Colossians 3:12 and 13. We'll come back to Colossians a couple of times on this verse. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another, and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another. Even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. It's a commandment. Revelations 22:14. Blessed are those who do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may enter through the gates into the city. In John 14:15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Are there any non-essential commandments?
You asking me? Are there any non-essential commandments?
Are there any non-essential commandments?
I believe no. No, there. If it's commanded, if it's a commandment from God, He doesn't just make stuff up. He says stuff He wants us to do. Yeah, it's. There you go.
No, we're not here to argue with God. God tells us what we're supposed to do, and just like, we talked the other day about the laws. There's no small sin and big sin. There's just sins. Well, there's just commandments, and we're
Yeah.
supposed to keep those commandments. So, all right.
You know, this, going back to where we were last Sunday, you know, in Matthew chapter 16, if you remember, or 17, he was talking about the servant who was forgiven the $10 million debt, and then turned around and wouldn't forgive the $17 debt of the person that owed him money. And verse 35, chapter 18, this is, and so before that, it said, in anger, his master turned on him, turned him over to the jailers until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. The point is, we've been forgiven so much that if we get that, if we understand what God's done for us, we can't not forgive someone else.
Mhm.
You know, something that has to be less than what we've done to God.
Right. Yeah, y'all might as well open your Bibles, Matthew 18. We're going to be parking it there here in a minute anyway. So, but Greg was referring to the parable of Matthew 18, where which follows teaching on forgiveness, and then he illustrates that teaching by using the parable of the unmerciful servant. And you're right. If God, and we'll talk more about this at a future point in the lesson as well. But if we say, God, if God has forgiven us, we have to forgive others. We have to.
It's a requirement. It's a command.
It's a command.
Okay, so let's look at some examples that Jesus gave us about forgiving. What's one of the most known forgiveness Jesus did? On the cross, exactly. Luke 23:34, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." And they divided his garments and cast lots. While he was being crucified, in the act of dying, he forgave them. It wasn't, well, if they do better later on. He forgave them right then.
Right, it did. Yeah, it was. That was not, I don't think that was divine forgiveness. I think that was his example of forgiving them as a human for what they were doing to him. They were not forgiven in the sense that their sins were expunged from the record, and God did not hold that sin against their account in judgment. I think it was his, his expression as a man where he was forgiving.
1 Peter 2:21 and 22. For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. We're supposed to follow in the steps of Jesus. That's why we're called Christians, because we're followers of Christ. Philippians 2:5, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. We're supposed to think and act like Jesus did. We're supposed to be able to forgive like Jesus did. So, we follow Jesus in a lot of different ways, don't we?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So, we should follow him in his example of forgiveness. Okay, so let's look at some of the early examples of the disciples. Which one almost parallels what we just talked about Jesus? Stephen. Stephen was being stoned to death, and he forgave those that were stoning him. What do you think Paul thought about that later on, as he remembered standing there that Stephen had forgiven him? That had to make an impression on him. So, we know that we're commanded to do it. So one of the other reasons we do forgiveness is because love calls for it. If we're loving people, we have to forgive them.
Yeah.
Because unforgiveness is hate, and hate's the opposite of love. So if we love them, we should. 1 Corinthians 13. We all know 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter.
I'll put a few extra verses in.
Oh, well, go ahead. Read yours then.
Verses 4 through 7. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
So if we're bearing all things, does that mean that we're holding griefs out against people?
No. Don't take into account the wrong suffered. That my love for you is not dependent upon how you treat me. You can treat me wrong, I'm still going to love you.
Do our kids always act the way we want them to?
No.
Do we still love them?
Yes.
Does,
It may not like them. That's not what it says. It says love them.
It says we love them. There are certainly times we don't like what they're doing and we don't like how they're acting, but we still love them. God still loves us. He wants us to do what's right. It's wanting the best for them. God wants everybody to be saved. 1 Peter 4:8, and above all things have a fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. If we love somebody and we forgive them of what they're doing, are we covering sins? What does it mean by covering sins? I can't forgive a sin.
Well, you can forgive a sin that's been committed against you. You can't give pardon for sin from a divine standpoint. But and that would, I mean, that's an interesting part of the discussion. You know, is my forgiveness for my offender dependent upon them asking God for forgiveness? So if they don't ask God for forgiveness, I don't have to forgive them. That's not what it says. I can forgive people that God still holds to account. That's what Jesus did on the cross. That's what we just talked about. Jesus forgave them. He did not personally hold it against them, but God still held them in judgment for the sins they were committing. Jesus washed Judas's feet on the night of his betrayal. Do you think Jesus forgave on a personal level, forgave Judas? I think so, but God still required it for his sin that be punished. So usually we don't think in terms of us going beyond what God does, but if we're obeying God's command to forgive and we forgive somebody, that doesn't mean that God has necessarily forgiven that person if they have not sought his forgiveness.
No. Okay, so the next section, forgive because we have been forgiven. We talked about this. Greg brought this up. We need to have some introspection. Ooh, that's a big word I just thought of. When someone has done something against us, do we compare that with what we have done against God? You know, you're not supposed to compare yourselves against somebody on their righteousness and how good you are and how bad they are. But do we look at what we have done to God is so much greater than what someone has done to us, no matter what they've done to us? In Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verse 32, it says, "And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God in Christ forgave you." It comes down to one thing. My sins put Jesus on that cross. Now, if he can forgive me for putting him on that cross, I ought to be able to forgive anybody for anything. That's what it says. It's what it should be. So now we go to that Matthew chapter 18. And we're not going to read the whole story, but we know the story that the master's there and he calls in one of his servants, and his servant owes him a lot of stuff. And he forgives him. But then that servant goes out and he finds somebody that has offended a little bit to him. And he won't forgive him. And he throws him in prison and he's harsh to him. And then the master finds out about it. And then the master calls him back in, and he's no longer forgiven of that. This is a story about God and us. God being the master and us being the servant. Now, are we the wicked servant who God has forgiven so much to us, and yet we turn around and won't forgive some little slight somebody did something to us? If that's the case, then we're going to go back before God because we didn't forgive. So we forgive in order that we can be forgiven. Matthew 6, 12 through 15 says, "And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." God is not going to forgive us if we don't forgive others. Flat out. It's a flat statement. It's not, will, he might. No, he tells us he won't. Mark 11, 25 and 26. "And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses." Jesus tells us God is not going to forgive us if we don't forgive people. Simple as that. Matthew 5, 7. "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy." You want to be given mercy? I do.
Sign me up.
And if I can't give mercy, then I'm not going to get mercy. James 2:13. "For judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment." Greg?
Yeah, maybe it'd be good to try to think a little bit, why is that? You know, what is the reason that this is a salvation issue? And I have two thoughts, but I'd like to hear what you guys say. You know, one thought is, if we don't forgive others, like God, it just shows that we don't really understand what God has done for us. You know, that we don't get it on a functional level, at a heart level, that if we don't understand what God's done for us, if we don't grasp that, that is a salvation issue. But the other part of that,
I, I think you're, that last part especially, I think is profound about, it just brings to mind things like, that we study the Beatitudes, we are the salt of the earth, and we are the light of the world, and the things that we do should glorify God. If we forgive somebody, when we forgive, we represent God to other people, and in doing so, we glorify Him. It's not about showing people how awesome we are, how much mercy I have. I'm doing this because I understand what God has done for me, and I can't withhold forgiveness from you if He has not withheld forgiveness from me. And I like what you said, your first point as well, about not understanding God's forgiveness. But not only that, we don't value God's forgiveness the way that we should if we're unwilling to extend forgiveness to other people. If God has forgiven me my sins, but I'm unwilling to forgive you your sins, then I'm in essence saying that your sins against me are greater than my sins against God. God can forgive mine because mine weren't that bad, but yours are so bad I can't forgive them. That's just false. I mean, that's a false way of looking at it. It's not valuing God's forgiveness the way that we should value it. And so, go ahead. God hates a lying tongue. Yeah, and yeah, so yeah, and for the one, then there's the verse. I mean, we're all liars. That's the one who says he has not sinned is a liar. And so if you say you've not lied, you're a liar. So you're in a bad spot then. But just the idea of why is forgiveness connected to salvation so intimately as it is in Scripture, I think is something that we should spend time reflecting on, and really allowing that thought as much as anything to frame the way that we view forgiveness and the way that we approach the topic of forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't always easy. I mean, we're speaking about it here in terms of it's a command, you got to go do it. It's hard. There are times when it's very hard. People, I know, I know there are horrible, horrible things that people do to one another, and it can take years. It can take a lifetime to work through those things to get to the point where forgiveness is extended. But it needs to always be something we're working towards. And in the things that we're saying and the way that we're teaching this, hopefully it's not sounding like, well, if you're not at the point where you can say, I forgive everybody of everything that they've ever done in this moment right now, and be absolute in that declaration that there's no hope for you, I don't think that's the way we're portraying it. I mean, forgiveness, like all godly disciplines, are things that are a spectrum that we have to work through and we have to always be maturing in.
So you're saying we're not perfect? We can't do it right away?
No, I'm not perfect. I know that. And it's something that we have to continually work on.
I think one of the things that we need to understand about forgiveness is that from our creation, the plan was already set in motion for Jesus to come and die on that cross because God loved us. So it all comes down to love and whether or not we love people. Now, one of the things that somebody said just last month or so, I don't remember where I heard it, but how can you not forgive your fellow Christians? How can you be, I don't want to talk to them, I don't want to be around them, if you want them to be in heaven with you for eternity? How could you think about, well, that guy's going to be my next door neighbor in heaven forever? Yes, it's not necessarily, and I thought of that when you were talking a minute ago. If we forgive someone, it's up to us to forgive them. Doesn't mean that they're going to forgive us back. It doesn't mean that that relationship is going to be just the same as it was, because there was probably, as we talked about, there's two sides to every story here.
Yeah.
But there was probably something on their side that they're not happy with, they don't like, they're not going to accept you. You can apologize, they're not going to accept your apologies. But the peace needs to be on your side. You need to have it because it's good for you. Yes, it gives a good example to others and maybe to the person you're trying to forgive, that you're giving that forgiveness. But God wants you to do that. God wants you to be forgiving, and He wants you, on the reverse side of that, He wants you to accept that.
This may not be a direction you want to go, and you got stuff to cover, and this is going to be too big of a detour, that's fine. But I think we do have to be a little careful, because there is this issue, yes, forgiveness should be freely given and from the heart. But you're right, this is a difficult area, and there's a lot of very real world problems that we get into with family or with coworkers in church. Where somebody has demonstrated that they've got very poor judgment when it comes to something they've done. And yes, there's been consequences, and you have to help them with those consequences, forgive them with any personal thing that relates to you. But there's a trust issue related to that repeated behavior. And so, when it comes to relationships, I think we have to understand that I can forgive someone, but there may be areas where I can't trust them because of their behavior.
Yeah, we talked about that this afternoon, that, if Johnny's my accountant and I find out that he's been skimming money off my books for a while, I can forgive Johnny, but I'm not going to let him do my books anymore. And that doesn't mean that I'm holding a grudge. That doesn't mean that I'm allowing that sin to define his life or define our relationship. But you're right. There is. I'm going to remove that. I don't want to put myself in the position where from now on I do have to question, is Johnny cheating me anymore? I don't want that. I want to remove that obstacle from our relationship. So Johnny, we're going to have a relationship outside of the context of you handling my money anymore, and now our relationship can progress. But if it's within the context of that old relationship where you were mistreating me, then I can't trust you there. So we remove those obstacles, and we can think of a dozen different specific types of examples where that would fit in. But there are, and we even talked about it earlier. One of the things about forgiveness is that needs to be restoration to the relationship. Well, in the parable of the prodigal son, the forgiving father, he spent his inheritance. Their relationship has changed. He doesn't have the same inheritance. He doesn't have the same position in that family that he used to have. He can still be called a son. He can still do the same work. He can still have the same responsibilities, but something has fundamentally changed in that relationship, even though the father has forgiven him. And so same with us. There could be fundamental changes to those relationships, even though forgiveness has been extended and accepted. And so you're exactly right. We can never go back perfectly to where we were before sin took place.
There can be forgiveness, but sin has consequences.
Yes, sin has consequences. Absolutely. Yeah. Tim?
One thing we really haven't touched on, I'm sure it's somewhere in Scripture that I don't know. God has a way of giving us rules, giving us directions that are counterintuitive at first
Vengeance is
Vengeance is a season in hell.
a season in hell.
You're
Okay,
setting
yeah,
yourself up to go
Yeah.
where you really don't want to go. And that's, once again, God just has, what seems counterintuitive is what you need to do. If
Yeah.
He said it, it's what you need to do. And the benefits, you can't even, God can't put it on you.
yeah. Well, that's, and there, we've had discussions before about, kind of oxymorons within the Bible, the idea of things that go against human wisdom or go against instinct. And this forgiveness, especially in the context of, a relationship where somebody has, this all flows together. We talked today, in most scenarios, there's probably at least some degree of wrongdoing on both sides. In many times when there's conflict, it's not because one person was 100% innocent and one person is 100% guilty. That's usually a spectrum of some kind. But even in a case where somebody is 100% innocent, somebody else is 100% guilty, it is counterintuitive for us to say that person who is 100% innocent should extend forgiveness even when forgiveness hasn't been sought, even when that person hasn't repented, even when that person hasn't asked for forgiveness. And yet, that's what we're told to do. We are told to forgive. And so, it may not be able to restore that relationship because that person may hold on to their sin. But it is counterintuitive. You're exactly right. But the blessing is in the forgiving. The one who does the forgiving is blessed. And in all the ways that you said, there's no festering there. There's no seeking revenge. There's no seeking, eye for an eye and those things.
I was just gonna say, when we struggle to forgive, we're not on our own. I mean, we still can, I've prayed that, please help me, God, please help me forgive.
Right.
Help me to be more, whatever,
That's,
passionate or
yeah.
lead me to a scripture or some things that will
Yeah.
reinforce. I know I
And-
need to, I'm having trouble, I'm struggling,
Yeah.
help me with it.
Some of these things in the last few minutes that we've talked about, we're on slide 20 of 37. So, so we will get to some of those things, and that's one of those things about how do we cultivate the skill, the spiritual discipline of forgiveness. How do we cultivate that? Because it doesn't necessarily come naturally. It doesn't necessarily always feel like the thing we want to do in the moment, and yet we can cognitively know that we need to do it. So how do we do that even when we don't feel like we want to?
Well, I think sometimes I thought I forgave someone, and like you said earlier, when I do, turns out I haven't yet. I thought I did because maybe I just don't think about it, but I don't think the
Yeah.
process may be completed.
I mean, we have the tendency to ignore things, and we think because we're ignoring it that we've forgiven. If we keep coming back to it and saying, "Oh, well, yeah, I still feel bad about that," well, that means we haven't really forgiven. We've just started ignoring it more and more. Well, at some point when you get to the past that into you truly have forgiven them, that subject or that person can come up and it not cause you to stop and go, wait, do I really remember this right? We need to understand that we all do things wrong. And we're going to get to it in later slides about, what you're supposed to do to try and fix that. So far, we're just talking about what we're supposed to do, not how we're supposed to do it. And we're going to get to some of that how a little later.
About a week from now.
Yeah, about a week from now. Exactly.
I forgive you, Chuck, for ringing the bell when we weren't done with our lesson yet.
But we knew that when we started
Yeah. I'm just
working
happy
up the slides.
I'm happy we got halfway through.
So, okay.
Thank you.